now with Representative Jamie Green. And we are talking about the convention process itself today. So I'm excited to see Convention of States people here who just want to come and learn about the actual convention process and walking that out. I'm also really excited to see new faces here that are interested in learning about Convention of States and what the Article 5 convention actually looks like. So thank you guys all for being here today. Lots of good Convention of States info in the back. If you guys need any of that, be able to sign the petition, be able to take some information home for yourselves. Whatever you guys need, feel free. And my business cards are back there as well with my contact information, so feel free to grab one of those too. If you need my contact info on the way out the door, feel free. We are Convention of States Michigan, so we are part of the National Convention of States project. We have a national team that kind of keeps the entire country on track, because in every single state there are 50 different state teams that are all working with the electorate, that are all working with all of us as the citizens of those states, as well as working with all of the representatives from the states as well. So the national team kind of keeps us moving, kind of gives us that national direction, and then we have state teams that are working across the state to be able to accomplish passing resolutions within all of our states. So we actually have our, let me, before I say that, this event is being live streamed as well, so thank you to anyone who is watching live on Facebook. And so, just so all of you guys are aware, we have the internet going, and we have our Facebook live stream going as well. So if you get your face in front of the camera, you might end up on Facebook Live, just so you know too. So thank you for being part of Convention of States Michigan, and thank you to I want to say a special thank you to some of our guests that are here as well. We have Chet Grant, who is here. He is our kind of my boss, if you will, and some of our other bosses that are in this room. He's our regional captain for our Michigan area. He kind of manages some of the teams that are here in our Michigan team, or part of our Michigan team. We also have Catherine Zemanek, who is here. She's actually our regional director. She's kind of Chet's boss's boss, if you will. So she actually handles.
You're all my boss.
She actually handles several states. She's actually part of the national team, and she oversees 7 or 8 different states, 7 different states, kind of in we're called the flyover region. We're part of kind of the Midwest flyover states. That she actually travels to all of those different states and manages the state teams in all of those different states as well. So thank you to Catherine for being here.
And I'm a Michigander.
And yeah, that's right, yeah, from Traverse City, right? Yep, from up north. Yep, absolutely, made the drive down here, so we really appreciate that. And then we also have Representative Jamie Green here with us as well from the Lansing, from the State Michigan House, and she represents this part of this area. This is one of her areas, House District 65. So we'll let her introduce herself here in a minute as well. And I wanted to take just a couple minutes to kind of introduce Convention of States, because most of us here already know what Convention of States is, but I'll just take a couple minutes to introduce Convention of States for those who don't already know. So like I said, we are part of the national team. So there is a National Convention of States movement. It's the largest grassroots movement in the country, maybe even in American history, really, if you can make the argument for that. And we are working within all of our states to actually hold an Article 5 convention of the states. What is Article 5? What is it that we're referring to when we say Article 5? We are referring to the federal United States Constitution. So the big one that's under glass in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. Article 5 of that Constitution gives the states the rights to actually come together to be able to hold an Article 5 convention, to be able to propose amendments to the United States Constitution. So it allows us to almost entirely bypass the federal government, so that we have a mechanism, the states have a mechanism, have a voice to be able to propose amendments to the Constitution should it ever become necessary for us to bypass a theoretical tyrannical government who won't keep itself checked and keep itself in its own box. So that is what our national movement is working to do, and that our state teams are working within all of that to be able to make that happen. So I have, for all of you, kind of a good outline, and if you are a Convention of States person, you may have already seen this, you might not have, because there's a lot of really good information for Convention of States resources and things like that, but I wanted to make sure that I highlighted this particular document, and I made it available for all of you. Feel free to take this home. I actually have more copies if you need it. And this is kind of what today's event is based off of decoding the convention. What is it that we're talking about when we say a convention that's part of the Convention of States? And so this particular document kind of gives us a really good kind of jumping off point for talking about the convention process itself and decoding what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about a convention. So, and it really breaks it down step by step, talking about the people leading, the people, all of our state teams coming together with the electorate, coming together as citizens of the states, coming to be able to go to our state legislatures, be able to go to our state capitol, those state representatives, not federal, state representatives, to have our state representatives actually pass resolutions within each state. We need a minimum of 34 to call a convention, and obviously we would hope for all 50 to be able to pass their resolutions and actually come together to be part of the convention. So this is actually the step that we're in right now. We have 19 states that have passed their resolutions, and several more. I know Catherine was just talking about it even a few minutes ago too, that are on the rise, or kind of on the docket, on the horizon for being able to pass their resolutions too. So we're looking at maybe even a few more. And once we get to that 34 minimum, then we are able to actually hold the convention. Step 2, having those state legislatures. The state legislatures are passing resolutions within the state's legislature themselves. So this is a resolution. It's not a law, it's not a piece of legislation. It's kind of a binding memorandum, if you will. A resolution specifically calling for an Article 5 convention, and specifically calling for that they want to be part of that Article 5 convention, and specifically saying that they want to be part of that Article 5 convention under 3 agenda items, under 3 topic items: term limits, limiting federal spending, and limiting federal jurisdiction over the states, kind of a return to federalism idea. So those 3 agenda items, those 3 topic items are getting agreed to within that resolution itself. It's the same resolution that's getting passed, getting introduced, and getting talked about and voted on across the country in every state legislature. And then that's what our state representatives are acting on. After that, step 3 is when the convention is actually called, when we get 34 states. When the convention is actually called, we hold the convention. Then the amendments, step 4, the amendments are proposed. So these are not legally binding in any way yet. The amendments that come out of actually holding a convention itself are simply just proposals that then actually have to go back to be ratified in step 5 in those same state legislatures again. So we have the state legislatures that are passing the resolution in the first place, and then we have the same state legislatures that are going back and ratifying and voting on any amendment proposals that come out of a convention. And then step 6, the Constitution actually being amended itself. So that's what we have Representative Jamie Green here for us today, is to kind of break down the actual convention process itself for us. Our national team back in August, the beginning of August, held a 3-day simulation for all of us to actually be able to see what a convention actually looks like. And I think it was 49, right? We had one state that didn't send, was it Maryland or something, right? Rhode Island. Yeah. Didn't send any representatives, but 49 states sent however many delegates, commissioners that they wanted to send to this convention simulation to participate in the actual convention itself, in this simulation. So Representative Green was one of the people that was chosen by our state team, our COS state team, to go to Virginia for a few days and actually walk out the convention process, and we have her right in our backyard. And so she was kind enough to actually take time out of this busy holiday weekend and this holiday season to be here and kind of walk us through what her experience was in the actual convention and what she did and how she voted and how they negotiated and how they talked and the whole thing. So we can actually see for ourselves what a convention actually looks like. So thank you, Representative Green, for being here. We'll have you come on up, and I will let you have the floor, let you introduce yourself. And
I have a feeling this is going to go a little long, so I'm going to sit down and save my feet. And I don't, do you want to sit with me,
Sure.
Kelly? And I'm going to have Kelly sit with me, so this can be more conversational, and then also answer questions that you may have that comes up as we walk through this process. Well, Thank you all for having me here today. Thank you for attending on, like Kelly just said, in a busy holiday season. Where I mean, my house looks like Buddy the Elf. So I love Christmas. I love the celebration of our Savior being born. It's an exciting time as a believer to participate in the Christmas season. And so, anyways, but thank you. It's an honor to be here today, and it was an honor to be chosen from the 110 of us, or actually senators as well, to be chosen to attend our convention. And I didn't quite understand what it was until after I left and the months after it, processing what I actually experienced. And so let's see, I'm Jamie Green, 65th House District. So I represent Northern Macomb County, the western half of St. Clair County, and the eastern half of Lapeer County. So it's a big geographical distance from Greenwood to Arcadia, Rockaway, Mussey. You go all the way across to Burnside, all the way down to 26 Mile Road in Macomb County, across there. So big district. Before I was a state representative, I was a homeschool mom who worked for a homeschool curriculum company, and I served on the Richmond City Council for 11 years. Had various jobs before being a mom, raising my children, and I am also a Navy veteran, which I was a cryptologist. So lots of wild rides, and I'm happy to tell you all about my history and my past. So here I am now, first year in. I'm a freshman, state legislature. I'm the vice caucus chair, so I'm on the leadership team for the Republican House Caucus. I am the education vice chair for the House. If we were a majority, which Lord willing we will be in a year, I'll be the education chair possibly. And I am also on what we call HRCC, which is the House Republican Candidate Committee. So I've been thrown in as a freshman, and especially the only female on a lot of these teams as well. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about what's going on in the House after we're done with this. So one of the things is, I don't know how I was chosen, and maybe you can enlighten me, or Catherine, or Chet can talk about why did you pick State Representative Jamie Green to...
Your buddy Kurt.
Oh.
Say no more, right?
That is it. So Kurt O'Keefe, who, I don't even know what is he the legislative liaison to the Convention of States? Has somehow found his way in my life a couple years ago, even before I was a state representative, and we just found ourselves. And he's a jolly guy, a lawyer, very talkative, loves senior issues, and is very passionate about Convention of States, and has somehow, I don't know if I was swindled or talked into, but has roped me into being part of Convention of States as well. So that's how I was chosen, I guess, was Kurt.
Very good.
Kurt was my champion.
Very good. And we thank you for being here and for being willing to take the time to go to the convention itself. So, when was the convention?
So the convention was the first week in August, which we flew down. It was kind of interesting. We went to Williamsburg, Virginia, which is not easy to go to, or at least get to if you've ever been there. So I flew into Richmond and took an Uber, which was like an hour drive to there. I, Lord willing, saved Convention of States money and had a girlfriend pick me up on the way back, and we got to spend some time with some of my friends in the car ride on the way back. So we met, yes, and when we first got there, it was, you had like a meet and greet, because it was, you had to have a getting to know you kind of person, because none of us realized, most of us never went there before, and we didn't know what we were going to experience. So something I'm going to make a comment on is, I do appreciate that the people who were put there were legislators for the most part. There were a few folks that were intimately involved in legislative governance, so they understood parliamentary procedure. I think that is really important in who censored, that there is no learning gap on boom, you get right into the committee process, boom, you understand the rules of how to run like a legislative body, essentially, because we ran it very similarly to how we run the House floor and how we run our legislature here in Michigan. And we'll talk about it. I do want to make sure we have time to talk about what we're discussing in Michigan. So I just at the end, I don't. So you are in a room with 49 other states. Rhode Island was not there, but here's the interesting thing there. They weren't at the original convention as well, so it was kind of very appropriate and historical. So most everybody had three people from each state. We only had 2, and I was partnered with former state representative Steve Johnson, and that was actually the first time we ever met too. So here it was interesting that we had to also figure each other out really quickly. And if you watch the convention, there was some dynamics there because, and he has turned into a great, like I wouldn't say a great friend, but like a brother in Christ, like a man who I admire and work with now. But we did have some iron sharpening iron there when we were on the floor of the convention on whether, because we had to come in agreement to vote yes, because since there was only 2 of us, it was majority had to rule, and if one of us said no, then our answer was no, even if one wanted to be yes.
And I don't know if you know the story, but Kurt Vanderwall was slated to go.
Oh, okay.
The third,
He was
and he had to back out at the last minute.
Okay. So
there would have been 3.
So there would have been 3 people. So I guess we're here. The first night was kind of getting to know you, like feeling each other out, seeing what we were kind of, because we didn't know what really was going on. We had a great performance by an actor, Benjamin Franklin, and which was quite awesome. And I think I have Facebook pictures or Instagram pictures of that. It was a great experience. But then the next day, we dove right into the committee process. And so we were all split up, and I've got my notes here just to make sure I get it right, to the 3 things that Kelly explained to you. So we had the term limits, and it also had judicial jurisdiction as well. So that was one committee. Then we had the fiscal restraints committee, and then we had the, I guess, federal legislative and executive jurisdiction committee. So we had the 3 committees that our goal was out of these committees to have proposals. And this is also how our state government in Michigan works. Well, in theory, it didn't work that way all this year. Where you have an idea, you bring it to the committee, you debate it in committee and grapple it in committee, and then it gets voted out of committee. So then, because the committee, if it gets supported, it is most likely going to get supported on the floor. So the 3rd day after committee is the day that we actually held the convention, where we brought these proposals to the floor and debated them. But also, because we had such a short period of time, and I really wish, hindsight, we had more time to grapple with this, then people started making amendments from the floor, and it did get a little bit chaotic, in a good way. So it never got chaotic as in like civil disobedience chaotic, but we were starting to figure this process out and what actually really needed to happen, and what these amendments that could get passed, because that's the key thing, is if you bring a room full of conservatives, do you think a conservative amendment to the Constitution is going to pass in the state of Michigan right now? No, it's not. So these needed to be truly bipartisan, like constitutional principles that all Americans believe in, that needed to be brought back to each state to be voted on. And so I've discussed, like so many ideas have come from this convention on how we can, because that was what this simulation was, is to come up with ideas to how we actually execute this as citizens of the United States to control our federal government and have these term limits, judicial jurisdiction, fiscal restraints, and the federal legislative and executive jurisdiction happen. So, and going back, so I was on the fiscal restraints committee, which was very interesting because we had a lot of debate on what does that mean? What does it look like? During that time, the federal government was already going through, we haven't had a balanced budget since Clinton, and we haven't really had a budget since then, and we've had these continuing resolutions. So we actually haven't had a budget, since I was in high school, I guess, I don't know, like, when you really think about it. And so, to me, I was very thankful I was put on fiscal restraints. We didn't get to pick our committee, but that is really important to me that because I'm a fiscal conservative, obviously, and I believe in federalism, capitalism, free market systems, and if we don't constrain the spending of our federal government, then everything will, I believe, will eventually default. So that was interesting. Again, you have a lot of personalities. So I almost think too we needed one more getting to know you day, because the Utah representatives or senators and Florida and South Carolina behaved very differently than this woman from Macomb County, Michigan. So and I would say that I was definitely in the minority there. There were only a few other female legislators there. So that also is interesting, because we know that women make up half the population, and so we should have a little bit more diversity there. I'm gonna pause though because I want to make sure you had this beautiful outline. Do you have that in front of you at all, or do I need to go pull it up?
I don't have it printed, but I'm good. I can remember
You
it.
have it in your head?
Yeah,
Okay.
for the most part.
I'm gonna pause and take a breath and take a drink.
And I'm just going to kind of bounce off of some of the things that you were saying. So day one, you get there was a meet and greet, and all of the states were all there with all of those. Did you guys call yourself delegates?
Delegates. We called ourselves delegates.
Okay, so all of the delegates are all there. And where was the actual location of the convention itself? Are you guys like at a hall somewhere?
So we were at a hotel in Williamsburg. So it was funny. I've never been to Williamsburg, so that was new to me. But they have preserved essentially old Williamsburg, which was one of the first. It was our first. I don't know. Was it our first capital? Some history person, give me the governor. There was the governor's house, like the capital of Virginia was there, and so they still have. It's almost like what we in Michigan would call like a greenfield village, essentially. That, and then our hotel just ran parallel to that. So,
and then there was like a convention room or something that was part of one of those big rooms that was part of the hotel.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, the hotel was designed for conventions where we could have rooms that we broke out into our committee, and then there was it was a beautiful room that we were able to hold the convention that day. I feel like I'm missing some, because I did have time to walk around. When did I walk around? Maybe it's because I got there early that day. I don't know.
Did a little sightseeing?
Yeah, I did. I make friends fast. So I found this awesome legislator. I don't know if she was from Montana, North Dakota, and we walked around Williamsburg together. We paid for tickets because I never saw it. It was really neat to see the governor's mansion, to see the Capitol, to see the homes, and walk into these historic places where the people who actually wrote the Constitution walked before, which was kind of, when you think about that, I'm getting goosebumps even just to think about that, was quite incredible. Who am I that I should be here among these greatness? So, which was really humbling to be a part of that. So,
did you find was there any of the state delegates or any states in general that kind of surprised you in kind of that initial interaction? Was there anybody that kind of stood out to you or anything?
Well, I will say that the gentleman who received do we call him the president of the convention? The president of the convention was the only one who actually campaigned for that job, and so that's why he got it. And I guess that's where I didn't know what I know going into it. I think I would have, if I do it again, I would clearly campaign for a position. I would have my amendments that I wanted to present already discussed beforehand, that I would be significantly more prepared. So I do admit and confess, because I had no idea really what this was I was heading into, that I wish I would have been more prepared going into it, because and everybody else, so it wasn't just me, so don't think I was alone in this, but everybody was in that same space, that we didn't know what we were going into. And I think there's quite a few that I ended up meeting that had we done this again, we would have gone in significantly more prepared. I probably I would try to find a way to finance even a staff member to come with me to help because there is a lot of information that, and I know it was just a simulation, so I'm not too worried about it, but if we actually go into a convention, it will be different because we're going to need, especially from our own state, like a legal team to help us. I mean, you want people to be as ordinary citizens as possible, but you also want to do this properly, and even, you don't, because we do this in our own legislature sometimes, you don't want to write law that is unconstitutional as well. And so you always want to stay in the guards of the Constitution, and especially because this was truly delegate-led. We were kind of on our own, like having to figure this all out on our own. And they did kind of sneak a little bit of influences. I did get into intense fellowship with Senator Santorum on my amendment, and I still stand by my amendment, which I'll read to you guys in a minute when we're there. But going into it now, knowing, I'm so thankful that I experienced it, because now I know I'm equipped, I guess, on how to approach this moving forward, and then also how to best represent Michigan.
I just have a kind of a question, comment. I thought I had read somewhere that they had done this simulation years before, and there were a handful of people there that had been at the original. So that's probably why that one gentleman worked so that he could be the president.
Was he there before? Was
I
that
believe
his
He was
so.
the president of the first simulation.
No, I thought Senator Horn was the president of the first.
No, it was Ken Ivory.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Ken Ivory, not Senator Horn. Ken Ivory was, but he wasn't the president of this one.
No.
Yeah, there was another one.
He did have the big committee though. He was the
Yeah.
chair of that.
He did get, okay. So, and I gotta be cautious because you're live streaming me, so I would speak very differently if I wasn't being live streamed, I'm gonna tell you that. So, yes, and so there was, I'm gonna be honest. Well, I am honest, but I'm gonna be vulnerable with you and the live stream. I did feel at sometimes my voice was not heard. And I don't know if that was because I was from Michigan, which was a blue state, and there was primarily Republicans there. I don't know if that was because I was a woman, but there were times that I have not experienced in Michigan, but Michigan operates differently than the rest of the country. And that I, for the first time in my life, and I even served in the military, did feel like I'm not, and it's so weird, this is a weird space for me to be in because I'm such a strong conservative woman, but that my voice was a little bit ignored. And sometimes when I brought things up, or they didn't want to necessarily engage in, like I had this idea, and one of them was probably even smarter than me to flesh it out, and it would have been a really good amendment. And that's where I'll go. Did I answer your question first?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll talk about the amendment that I introduced in the fiscal restraints. So so before I talk about what I introduced, what I was trying to do is we keep raising the debt ceiling. I don't believe there should be any reason at all to raise the debt ceiling unless we are in a time of war, a time of crisis. And that is what I was trying to convey. That there is no reason to raise the debt ceiling unless the Congress declares war. And that was where Senator Santorum and I did have this, he's like, you can't demand us to then declare war just because of that. And I was like, why can't we? If things are so bad that we have to raise the debt ceiling, you bet your bottom dollar we better have declared war then. Because that's the only reason in my mind that we should have to spend more money than our debt ceiling. And he was not comfortable with what I was saying. And so what was my amendment was, in times of declared war, Congress may temporarily suspend the balanced budget requirement by a majority vote in both houses. In cases of national emergencies, as determined by 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress, the balanced budget requirement may be temporarily suspended. So I brought that up. Then Mr. Bradbury, then wanted to amend it further. He did not like the majority, so then he changed it to, in times of declared war, Congress may temporarily suspend the balanced budget requirement for the duration of the declared war by a majority of vote in both houses in cases of national emergencies as determined by 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress. And I actually I agreed to his amendment. It was a friendly amendment to me. And that's where I would have appreciated like having time to debate this and grapple this out and refine it a little bit more of what, because I'm a big picture person and I needed a detailed person to come alongside me to get it refined. Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses of Congress by roll call vote deemed it necessary, may exceed the spending limit in the section 1 for 1 fiscal year by borrowing as provided for in the second clause of the 8th section of Article 1 of this Constitution. And so I received his as a friendly amendment. It failed by voice vote, and then my amendment as a whole failed then the committee. I think I only got 2 votes, to be honest with you, which surprised me. So to me that was a big surprise that I didn't understand. If we're all here for fiscal restraints, then what are the requirements then to raise the debt ceiling? So it was disappointing, but it was okay. It actually helped make me a better legislator coming back to Michigan, that knowing I'm going to be disappointed, not everybody's going to agree with me, and I need to keep my big girl pants on when I'm the only one standing in the room shouting something and everybody disagrees with me, because you're like a little shocked when that happens. So that was I tried to introduce this in my committee, and I kind of got poo-pooed because I found in my committee that there was a conversation happening between 3 to 4 men, and even though you were in a room of 40 people, they ran the committee a little bit. So, but now I know I'm more prepared, and then this is how then when we go to, because we've had this simulation, I'm in a spot that whenever this happens, I'm able to then help train and prepare whichever delegates we send as a state to this convention.
It's interesting that you mentioned now a few times even having, because we as the Convention of States volunteers and all of us, we spend so much time focusing on educating and encouraging and working with just the electorate in general, that needing to actually stop and educate the legislatures has never even crossed my mind that would be a thing. So it's interesting that we also need to make sure that we're spending time educating our state legislatures on this convention process and on what Convention of States is and walking all of that out.
Yes, well, and I think it's really important right now, because we're in a weird space in Michigan, obviously. It's important that if we may not necessarily get a resolution signed like this term, but it's important to be discussing with your legislators the principles of fiscal restraints. Like why is that a foundational conservative, essentially, principle? But even actually just an American principle. Why should we not spend as much? What happened? Through this I also learned about the history of why we need term limits, and that's because of, was it the 17th Amendment? That we took the power out of the legislature, which we have stripped the powers of the state legislature over and over and over again, and they should be more powerful than Congress. And we have stripped that power away, because if we still had that where the legislature picks the senators, we elect the senators, you bet your bottom dollar that Debbie Stabenow wouldn't have been there this long, since because I worked on Spence Abraham's campaign when I was in high school, and I'm not no spring chicken now. I mean, I've got kids graduating high school. So, now Peter, whatever, our 2 senators. Gary Peters. Those 2, they would not have been there. That position would have changed every time the legislature would change. And so we wouldn't have needed term limits, especially in the Senate, because they would essentially be self-imposed by the electorate who elects the state legislature. So I've learned and grown so much. So do we need term limits, or do we need to put that power back into the state legislature? Right? Because we do have term limits here in Michigan, so it would be self-imposed. And that's just, yes.
Nice question.
Sure.
I've talked with Senator Green about this already, but.
Senator Green?
Green. You.
Oh, Representative Green. Well, that's what I was like, we have two Greens and a Breen, so.
Senator Green's and I. Anyway, I talked to Representative Green about the potential to lead the charge to do the model language for choosing the commissioners and also putting the criminal penalties in place. And hopefully we'll be able to lead on that in Michigan. But one thing that people don't know, you were talking historically, the balanced budget amendment resolution has already passed in Michigan. So at any time, we could get to 34, and we want Michigan to be able to join that convention and have the rules in place. So would you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Wait, which part? Because you're talking about the state stuff?
Just where you are with leading the charge.
Oh, so one, I mean, I've signed on to the resolution, but a hesitation that I have as a legislator moving fully forward with this is in Michigan, we don't have a mechanism in place to choose the delegates. And so that was one thing that I realized going there, because obviously the team, Kurt O'Keefe, picked me to be there, but Kurt O'Keefe should not, I love him, I love you, Kurt, should not have that power to pick Jamie Green to be that delegate. And so how is that going to happen, and what does that look like? And that actually needs to be in I believe needs to be in state statute on how, if we were to have a convention, how these delegates are picked. So one thing, obviously a learning curve, is that I believe they need to be elected for the, and because we are a purple state, it should be balanced in Michigan. As much as I'd like to pack that with Republicans, I know I can't, because right now there's obviously a trifecta, and they're gonna pack it with Democrats. So, and that's always, until something drastic changes, Jesus comes back again, we're gonna have that in Michigan for probably the rest of my lifetime here. And so I do believe it should be a person in the legislature, and it should be balanced, so that when you take away from the legislature and send somebody away potentially for a couple months, they can still operate business with where their minority was as well. So you have to almost take two people from each chamber, from the Senate and from the House. But as we also ran into situations with just me and former Representative Johnson that we didn't always agree, you do need a third party breaker. So I have not, and I'm actually seeking feedback, and I don't know if the Convention of States is seeking feedback since we've met on how that fifth person should be chosen. Because we can have we can send as many delegates as we want, but because we only get one vote. So I think if it gets too big, then it's going to be too muddied, and we're not going to be able to make quick, clear decisions. So I do believe that the two balance, I haven't decided yet on that fifth person be chosen. I don't know if you thought about that, or Catherine, is that what you wanted me to say, Catherine?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought for all of us. Yeah.
And then obviously what happens to us if we go rogue? I mean, what are the consequences and I guess actually defining what does rogue look like actually. So, because this is one thing I learned, there is no room for a runaway convention, because you bet your bottom dollar all those legislators, they are gonna tar and feather you out there if you start going out of the way of what you were called to do, and if it's not what we call germane to why we were sent there. So I don't believe there is the possibility of this runaway convention that people talk about, because even if there is a runaway convention, it still has to be ratified by the states. So there's no way that that's actually going to happen, because what state is then going to vote on something that was brought back from a runaway convention? They would just scrap it and start again. So, and I believe that that we still have a sense of decorum. We still have a sense of the people who live in this country, who are citizens of this country, do genuinely want what's best for this country, and those people that are sent there in that room believe that as well. And so I think it's important for us as a state moving forward is to get this in place. And talking to the Democrats about this, that they don't seem to object to it. They don't understand necessarily what we're trying to do in general.
I find out a lot of Republicans too.
Yeah. Well, the Convention of States has done a really good job at vetting, either through the candidate process or our legislative process. I think most of us know who you are. We just don't. I would say they don't understand what you're actually trying to do, or well, now my mind has been completely opened after experiencing the simulation convention process.
So this overall convention was only 3 days, correct?
Yes, it was only 3 days.
So you got there day
Yep.
one.
Day one.
So you only had 1 day when you guys had broke out into
Yeah, we only had 1 day for committees and then one day
for the floor vote.
Yeah, so the floor vote
The
where we
actual
debated the actual convention, which you can go onto the article, the simulation, the Convention of States webpage, and you can print out all the minutes. They did like a detailed everything that was brought to the floor, and I mean, this was probably the most well-documented event. Every single moment was also recorded, so you couldn't hide from anything on there. Hence, when former Representative Johnson and we had a disagreement, and I was like, "You did what?" And the whole room was silent, and my voice goes, and then everybody laughed because I was like, "What do you mean?" Like it was. And you didn't sleep much, so already by day 3, you're getting a little spicy on top of that.
How would this compare, if this were real, if this would have been a real convention, then how long would it have taken, do you think? I mean, what's your assessment of
It would have taken
how
a
it would
couple
have been
months.
different?
It would be different because you couldn't just shoot from the hip. And I would say a lot of them were. You had to be very specific. We would have to have been much more specific and concise than what was actually passed. I read this and so for example on that proposal 1, no person shall be elected to serve in the House of Representatives more than 9 full terms, nor elected or appointed to serve in the Senate more than 3 full terms. This article shall not disqualify any person from completing a term in Congress to which that person was elected or appointed. This one, I guess, was an easier one to pick. Would this pass? I guess thinking. So that's the thing is everybody has to come in agreement. I mean, is it 50 plus 1 or 25 plus 1? How does?
Are you talking about to get the proposal out of the
out of the convention?
26.
26. So you need 26 to get it out of the convention. So you would need more time to essentially do lobbying for your cause. And one of the big issues is like the senator out in Utah, he is championing this. The federal government has a lot of land, and he doesn't believe that the federal government should have a lot of land, which I agree with too, but that's not a Michigan issue. So I guess why would it be something that I would champion, or why is it important? And so he would need time to sit down with me to understand, to teach me and train me why it's so important for his state, and convince me and also the other 4 people that are with me on why we should vote yes to then his thing. So you do need more time to get stuff done, to have conversations, to really like explain why this is so important, why it doesn't need to be this way, and give me time to flesh out like why we should have to declare war in order to raise the debt ceiling. And because even the senator Santorum thought you can't force Congress to declare war. And I'm like, well, if I said, if it's so bad, you should have to declare war. Then why are you raising the debt ceiling? There should be no reason to raise the debt ceiling unless we're in an emergency. But I only had a 5-minute conversation with him. I would clearly need more time to explain that to him of why I thought that was important, and really persuade and negotiate with him why we should put that into our one of our sections of the proposals that we wanted to pass. And so obviously if this actually happened, there would be a whole economy around it essentially too, because you have 50 states, Lord willing, Rhode Island would show up to come, and you would have then their staff members, you would have media coverage. I mean, you would need we couldn't hold it in Williamsburg, I'll tell you that, to have something like this. Also, because to me, it's one of the most important things we can do as a nation or as an individual citizen. So it needs to be taken very seriously and the proper time. And we wouldn't get done until it was done. So until you got to 26, you're there until you get to 26. So there's I would think there would be no time constraints on it. If you got 26 in 1 week, I mean, that would be awesome, because it would save a lot of money, because we'd have to appropriate funds to send people here, and that would be amazing. If we could get this. How fast can you get to 26? Would be the question. But you also have to be cautious about that, because there's politics involved in that as well. These sort of situations, I think, are free from lobbyists, essentially. I haven't seen where a lobby, like a true lobby, like company would come in and pay for a seafood tower for a legislator to vote a certain way. Not that that happens, but it may happen.
You can put those rules in place though,
Yeah.
if you look carefully at that, about the lobbying, that no lobbyists can come in and spend money to
Right.
pull votes away, so yeah.
Right.
You gotta really have tight laws.
Oh, that's right. So it's so important that this is done right.
Well, and it kind of goes back to, I had one more question for you too, that you had mentioned, also having to bring in a staff, possibly, for yourself, and to make sure that these these proposals are written correctly, that they're written legally, or that they can be legally binding. What types of support people would you guys need to make something like this a success?
Well, so right now in our current legislator, I have a legislative director who has access then to our legal team that is it's a nonpartisan office in the state of Michigan that all legislators have access to do research if we needed that. So he's just another person that helps me, because you've got to remember, the legislator is the one who is doing events like this, who's going to all these places, who's the negotiator, but we don't necessarily always have time to do the deep entrenched research. And so I would think we would need a staff member or two that then would have access to that legal team back in Michigan if we needed help, if we had questions, if we didn't, because you go in and you don't know what you don't know. And so it would either be a lot of texting, phone calls, or you bring in people who are passionate about these issues, who actually have legal experience in crafting, or not, because, okay, let me get this, I'm really cautious of how I say this, because normal people can make laws, because we make the laws. We don't have to enforce, we don't have to, we do have to put in force, but we don't have to argue what we put in. That's like a lawyer, that's the judicial areas. So you want normal people to make your laws, because you want them to be written for normal people, or in my case, you want to repeal a bunch of the laws too. But you still need those people who are experts and studied in this to support the average citizen who makes new laws. Does that make sense, or does that sound crazy? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was thinking of my role as a legislator, because I am so not worthy of this. Who am I that I'm doing this? But then you want somebody normal, who's lived a normal life, who's had jobs, who's been a business owner, or been a mom, been a member of your church, been a member of your community, because that's the most reasonable people, because you don't want a legal person necessarily writing your laws. So,
But you do need that legal support.
but you do need that legal, I do need that legal support, yes. And
Advisory.
Yes, and advisory, yes. And also, you don't want to be alone in this. I mean, granted, you would hopefully would have a relationship with them, the 4 other people that we would send. But then we also need a team then who might need to be a therapist, I guess, or a referee.
One of the, you'll recall when we were talking about the model language, one of the suggestions in there is to have an advisory committee.
Yeah.
And I really like that idea. I think that's kind of hitting on what you actually have discovered here, that you need to have an advisory committee to be able to call on.
Yeah. Did we talk about that, or was
We
that?
did, and
okay.
remember Kurt
Yeah.
didn't like the idea, but you were.
Yeah, now I have the argument for why we need the advisory committee. Yeah, that's right, Kurt didn't like the idea. Because we've met in my office after, because we've been trying to unpack this, because as the convention goes on, or we get away from it, we realize more, and there's revelations of what happened, what transpired while we were there, and why it's so important to practice this. So when it does come to it, which hopefully sooner than later, that you, especially in Michigan, we are sending people who are experienced in parliamentary procedure, experienced in negotiation, who have been elected by the people of Michigan to represent them, obviously in Lansing, and then to go and send them to the convention.
I think we'll end with this, because I know you had mentioned that you wanted to kind of wrap things up with a kind of just brief discussion on kind of Michigan legislature.
Well, I think it was about what we discussed, was what I wanted to set aside time was to talk about when Catherine and Sarah and Kurt came to my office on how now we move forward as a state of Michigan, how you as members of the Convention of States need to talk to your legislators about then passing statute on how do we pick people to send to go to this convention. Obviously, most people, if you live in this area, you're probably a conservative, and so we're kind of focusing on a lot of other things, and so Convention of States is really important, but at the same time, we're literally putting out fires right now too. And so I think, though, starting with this procedure and statute is a good bipartisan way that we can also still be relevant in the current environment in Michigan as Convention of States, and still have connection with your legislator as well for when the time then comes to sign the other resolutions. And does anybody have questions? I talk a lot if you'd like.
I have one question I'm a little confused on, because I don't live in parliamentary procedure world. You have a committee, and the committee is assigned to one of the 3 planks, so to speak, it sounds like. So
Well, a delegate is assigned to one of the 3 planks, yes.
okay, and so theoretically, if you have multiple delegates, from your state, you could split up and maybe have representation in all 3 instead of maybe just 2.
Yes,
Okay,
that would be ideal.
that makes sense.
Yes.
But when you do all the work in the committee, and then you come out and now you're going to debate, aren't you debating proposals that the committee agrees to in total before you come out on the floor? Are you still debating when you come out on the floor? Because you mentioned that
Well, you can still discharge amendments from the floor, and we're allowed to do that even in Michigan in our legislators. So that I sit on the education committee. They passed. Let's see. Let me give you just one. The A through F got repealed. Okay. I guess that's not making a law, but it got voted out of committee. Well, obviously 5 of us voted no on that. So once it got to the floor, I still had one more opportunity to add an amendment to that or to change that, because even though it may not have gotten at the committee process, the body of the whole may say, oh wait, that actually was a good idea, and then may be able to put it in on the floor.
That makes sense.
Or if somebody who was in the executive jurisdiction, like federal legislative, didn't get the opportunity to sit on the fiscal restraints committee, they would be able to bring their proposal. Ideally, they would bring it to the committee first for ideas, so then it would be smoother on the floor, but that doesn't always happen.
Okay.
And especially because here, we only had one day in the committee, and then people were it was starting to click with them, and so then we're like, wait, no, I need this. So that's why I think it got a little bit more chaotic than normal, because there wasn't just time.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other questions?
So you want, your purpose of going there for fiscal responsibility,
Fiscal
Could you-
restraint,
I'm
very
sorry.
different than responsibility.
So if you're going from Michigan with that being your point to go there, is that the only thing that is discussed? Like, so each state would have one thing that they wanna discuss, or? would
No, so if we would have had 3 delegates attend, each one of us would have been put in a different committee, and it was just kind of a draw, like, I don't know, if I would have requested a committee, could I have been put on that committee?
I think Steve was the chair, so he decided.
Yeah, so Steve was the chair, and we said, who wants to be the chair, and I was like, you can be the chair. So, the chair decided what committee each one of us went on. So I didn't go there I went there as a delegate of Michigan, then I happened to be put on the fiscal restraints committee, which I appreciated.
So how does the convention get put together for why you're going there? The purpose of going to have the constitutional convention?
So what convention of states exists is to enact that Article 5 of the Constitution, because we're not happy with what Congress is doing. Congress won't do what we're asking them to do. So we as citizens, the electorate in the United States of America, can kind of circumvent Congress and make our own constitutional amendment. So that's what we're going there to alter the Constitution, because Congress is not doing their job.
But just one amendment, or the whole thing?
It could be, no, not the whole, and that's what it's important of why is the convention called to begin with. And so that's where, do you guys, in their literature on the table, in Convention of States, they have their three pillars of what they believe. Now, anybody in the country, there can be a far left organization that says, we want everybody to be transgender or something like that. Like they could go and try to get a constitutional convention on making protections like that in the Constitution if they want it. Any organization can do that. Specifically, Convention of States is just called to these 3 pillars though. Because it's truly bipartisan as well.
It's a resolution, and all resolutions that pass have to have the same language so they can aggregate together. And picture it this way, so there are piles of resolutions that have been sent to Congress, right? This group wants a balanced budget amendment. Gavin Newsom's group wants to get rid of the Second Amendment. Go for it, dude. This group wants U.S. term limits. This group wants there to be some an amendment on pro-life. Right. So we have 19 applications right now for our resolution. They're all the same language. When we get to 34, that's when they must call the convention, and they can only address things that fit under those 3 topics at the convention. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying.
And that's where those 3 committees come in as well too. There's that term limits committee, the fiscal restraints committee, and then the legislative and executive jurisdiction committee. Those 3 different committees. That's where those 3 committees come from, is those 3 different pillars, those 3 different agenda items that are all in the same resolution.
So each one of these state applications has been approved and it's out there, are all advocating for the term limits, spending restraints, authority, executive committees, those are all exactly worded the same.
Exactly the same.
When you hit 34, it takes off.
And it takes off, yeah. So, and it doesn't matter that it was signed in a previous legislature, correct?
Oh, no, doesn't matter at all.
Doesn't matter.
Unless there's some sort of a sunset clause on it,
And
and
we
there's
did-
only one sunset clause right now,
Okay.
that's Texas.
Okay.
I think it's important to note that, taking off of what Catherine just said, people all over the country want different things done.
Yes.
Okay, they're gonna petition the government for term limits, for, no cats and dogs after 60, whatever it is. Everybody wants something done, but Article 5 is the vehicle that promotes and allows us to actually make it happen. It gives us the process through which this all can take place. There's a number of movements out there that there's no process to accompany it. Okay, that's really critical here when you get down to it.
So going.
Hold on, he's been raising his hand for.
Right, I like your stand on the 17th Amendment. I was just wondering, under the three pillars, the 17th and the repeal of the 17th Amendment could be included.
Yeah.
Maybe under term limits.
Well,
No,
no, I don't think it could. That would be a separate.
Federal jurisdiction and.
You think it would fall under federal jurisdiction and restraint?
That's what my
Okay.
prayer says.
Okay. So not under fiscal restraints, but under the federal legislative and executive jurisdiction.
Okay, and one of the biggest draws at the Woods and Water Weekend for going out and getting people to sign the petition, once you said term limits, what do I have to sign?
Yeah.
That was big.
Yeah. Because if you, in Congress or the House of Representatives, like our Lisa McClain, that person is kind of only, who's been there, has only cycled through, they've done like maybe 12 years. Because we've got Lisa McClain, before Paul Mitchell, before Candace Miller, so, and that's just the last 30 years. So we haven't had somebody, Did you have, who was before that? No, it's okay, but it seems to me that spot doesn't necessarily need the restraints like the Senate does. Now, in other states, they may want and require that, but I haven't seen in Michigan that somebody stayed in the House of Representatives for 40, 50 years.
The Dingles did.
Well, okay, the Dingles did.
Yeah.
Well, the Dingles, isn't there been like 3
I think he
Dingles?
was in there
Been
for
free.
40 years.
Yeah, that is true. He was there for 40 years.
But they can also go from the House to the Senate, can't they? Or
Oh,
vice
yeah,
versa?
yes.
So they can term out in one and then go to the other.
Yes. If
24 years total was the.
Wow.
Yeah, 24 years total is what I think we put in our, section 2, no person shall serve in Congress for more than 24 years in total. And I know that may seem like a long time to you guys, but actually, if you go from one chamber to another, it's kind of like starting all over again. And so I do like how we changed it in proposal 1 in Michigan, that I can stay in the House for the entire term, because if I only did my 6 years, the bureaucracy and the lobbyists weed me out. But now that I can serve 12 years in the House, then switching over to the Senate, I still have then gained like leadership positions, know the committees, know the operation of the House, and better, I think, serve my community, my district by staying in one chamber than switching over to another one.
But wouldn't a lobbyist just follow them?
Well, no, they just wait us out. Is like if there's something we want to pass that they don't like, they just wait 6 years and then they try to get somebody in our spot who then would agree with what they want. Okay. So that's the flip side to having term limits, is then the bureaucracy and the lobbyists then govern and not the elected official.
So you kind of need to find that middle.
Yeah, you need to find that middle ground with term limits.
Because you do need lobbyists, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys are lobbyists essentially. I mean, the Convention of States, aren't you a filed registered lobby group? They're not allowed on the House floor. There's rules on contributions. There's rules with the lobbyists, but at the same time, like even Citizens for Traditional Values, Right to Life is a lobby group, like even Planned Parenthood is a lobby group. Like these are the people who have these values that they want to try to communicate with the electorate that I might not know about. Certain things, I don't know, the peanut growers, I'm not educated on that, so they have their own lobby group and they educate me about peanuts. So there is an important place for lobbyists, but you have to be cautious with them as well. that they don't run the show.
Any other questions?
I just had a question on going forward. How do we get that process going in order to pick the delegates that would go to convention? Because I've talked to people at different events that I've done, and that's why they're reluctant to sign our petition, is because I don't have an answer to give them on how those delegates would be picked.
And we're working on that right now, and so, we've got, well, in me, reconciling, how do we get to that fifth person? Does the governor appoint somebody? Does both bodies of the legislature, elect somebody? Is it a citizens initiative nationwide? Like, I'm happily receiving ideas on that fifth person. I'm kind of stuck on how both and here's another way, do both legislators, is it each side picks their own, or does the whole body pick two? And one has to be a Democrat, one has to be a Republican. So we're still we're not gonna get any statute or any legislation passed until May, at least now at this point. At least I think, well, who knows what's gonna happen in the next couple of months, because for those of you who don't know, there's 2 state reps that won their mayoral races, and so we are tied right now in the House of Representatives. So, and judging from the last year, there hasn't been really too much bipartisan support, except for like naming roads, which I agree at. That's where I'll vote yes. But then I even put my own self-restraint on that. They have to be like a military, police, like first responder person. But anyways, so we've got to then shop the piece of legislation. We've got to, like, am I going to introduce it? Is a Democrat going to introduce it? What committee do we kind of want it to go to? Is it a government operations thing? How do we get the leadership team to then put it on the floor? So there's a lot that needs to go through a process of writing the piece. Then what we call blue backing it, which is the actual color of the paper of where you put the legislation, getting people to co-sponsor and be a part of that movement, and then getting the leadership to actually discharging it to the floor, and putting it through the committee process, discharging it to the floor, and then having 56 votes to vote on it. Then you have to get it through the Senate as well, and it goes through the exact same process. Then you have to get the governor to sign it. So
that one has to be signed by the governor.
yeah, that one has to. So that one's not as easy. Do I have to trade my youngest child for that? Like, it's not, I mean, you guys laugh, but no. I may trade her for that. No. I have a 14-year-old daughter right now, so any of you parents of former teenagers, you know what I'm living through. She's actually saying she's getting straight A's. She's been homeschooled her whole life, and she's going to private school and getting straight A's. But needless to say, she's like a hybrid of her parents, so she's a super genius with my sassy mouth. You had another question?
I'm thinking that you answered it for me. I'm just a little confused about who the delegates that go to the convention. They're both parties or just one party?
Well, so how I'm crafting this legislation, how I would like to, if I sponsor this, I would like to have a Republican and Democrat from the House and a Republican and Democrat from the Senate. I have not figured out how the fifth person should be yet.
Okay.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
No, it doesn't have to. It can be any way you guys want it. If you just want like one person from every county, not a legislator, it can be anything goes right now in Michigan because we have no process for how these delegates are chosen.
But you do have model language that has been
yeah,
evaluated.
there is model language of how other states do it and stuff. This is just how Jamie Green, if she was in charge, would do it.
I get that. I like that too.
All right. Oh, yes, sir.
By having no process, as you're saying, does that give us the reason behind why it seems like everything has sort of come to a stalemate at 19, and why it's not moving forward in any way, shape, or form?
In the rest of the country, Catherine might be able to speak more to that.
I have my opinion about why we're stalled. I think people are just afraid right now. Honestly, they're worried about the country. They don't trust elections anymore, right? I mean, there's so
Right.
many things they don't
I
trust.
understand that very
So-
well, I don't either.
Yeah, one thing I think though, is Jamie's indicated, you can trust state government because it still functions. We always look to DC and say, oh my gosh, it's a disaster. But what they do in Lansing and what they do in these other capitals, they do work together on things sometimes. Lansing's a little wonky right now.
Right now, for the first time in like my lifetime.
But I will tell you, there's a lot of movement right now. Ohio has, we're in committee there. We passed out of both committees in Iowa legislature, and Idaho looks very, very good. So there's a lot of movement going on over there. So, we just have to spread the word.
Well, yeah, and it's, I mean, you've got such a small volunteer force trying to really impact a nationwide thing. And also, and that is true, people are scared right now. They don't trust, especially, mostly, if you turn on the TV and the radio, all you hear about is the federal government. You never hear about state governments. And the state government, your county government, and your municipal government is who impacts you the most in your life. And I don't know if we've been tricked into that we shouldn't look to these more local forms of government is who actually runs your daily life. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, the most important person in my life is who flushes the toilet. Like, where does that go? Who takes care of that? To me, that's the most important, because who does the power go on? So, and that's your local municipal government is so important. And then same with the county, working in conjunction with them, and then obviously then the state getting out of the way to let those municipal governments function the way they're intended to, and making sure the state government that all these counties and municipalities work together statewide. There's I would like to apply a lot of this to our own state government in fiscal restraints. I mean, $83 billion in a budget is absolutely insane. And if you look at the nuts and bolts of what's in our budget, it's ridiculous. And that's why I voted no on it, and I will keep voting no on it. We're getting off topic of Convention of State stuff, which I'm happy to stay.
Because we're really about
Fiscal restraints, and federalism is one of my principal values, that you want your state legislature to be strong, to stand up to the federal government, just like our founding fathers did, and just like my ancestors did. I'm a daughter of the American Revolution, and my 7th great grandfather fought for that. And to have those state rights, and to preserve capitalism, to preserve the free market system, that hinges mostly on the state governments. Because the federal government, you have 435 people in the House and 100 in the Senate, and in Michigan you only have 110. So you can be in the House, and how many is in the Senate? I don't know. 37? 37 in the Senate. So you have a smaller number of people and you find when you have a smaller number of people, you're more likely to get something done. So in the state of Michigan, which clearly just happened, the Democrats were able in a year to get everything they absolutely wanted done, which is unfortunate, but hopefully we'll change that. Well, I don't know, there may be Democrats here, so you may not want to change that.
I heard somebody say they've been waiting 40 years to cram these bills through.
Yes.
And they are.
And they are. It's been painful. So I don't know how many of you are my constituents, but if you're not, make sure you spread the love to your state, well, depending if they voted the way you wanted to. Give them some love, because we've been put through the ringer this last year, and it has also been physically and emotionally exhausting, because we feel helpless because I look at your faces, and that's the reason I drive to Lansing every day, is to fight for your freedoms and to preserve your way of life. And I don't want to say that I'm failing you, but I definitely hit a wall, and it was very frustrating.
Don't give up.
I'm not giving up. This is what God has called me to do for such time as this, and I'm committed to that.
Well, what we got to do is, people got to get away from the mindset that the people that we vote for are not our leaders. They're our representatives.
Right.
And they're supposed to do as we say. But everybody, they use that term leader, and and they follow that with, they're gonna lead us no matter what, and that's not the way it's supposed to be.
No, but I would say that you would want to know the character of your representative.
Absolutely.
And one of those character traits would be leadership.
For what the people want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but if they don't have your ideals, why are you putting them in office to begin with, though? So I guess there's two ways to look at that. That if you believe in family values, if you believe in the right to life, if you believe in local control, then you are going to vote for me to help lead that charge. So we are, and I do understand what you're saying.
And I get you too, what you're saying too.
That
Yes.
I do answer to what if you don't want me to, and this is, if you don't want me to vote a certain way, then you need to indicate that. And this is where we do need to have some grace with our other
Correct.
Republican legislators, because they don't live in the thumb where it's solid red. And they may not always vote, and you may say, we need to primary them, we're angry with them, but they're also listening to their constituents as well.
That's so true.
So, and we have to be respectful and honor them in that way too. But that's why it's so important to get to know your legislators, to spend time with them, to go visit them in Lansing, I appreciate, I've got some precinct delegates who will bring my husband a meal, because my husband is essentially behaving like a single father during the week and taking care of my two kids, and or tutoring my daughter in math, or offering to pick up my daughter from school at times. That I'm so blessed that I've had people who have gotten to get to know who I am, and so they know my character, they know what I believe in, and then they're part of this movement with me and helping me and raising me to be a leader for what they want
Correct.
in their area.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking all the time and getting all of our questions answered and kind of walking us through the convention and helping to educate all of us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Everybody get a picture. I was like, things don't exist unless you post it on social media.
How about if I
You
did a
got
picture
camera.
of the group and all of, and you and, that's
You're gonna text this to me?